The irreducible principle of malleability, intelligence as a system, not a static trait, the axiom of cognitive plasticity, the most fundamental, undeniable principle underpinning the entire conglomerate of these texts is the axiom of cognitive plasticity. This is the irreducible truth that intelligence, competence, and potential are not fixed quantities, they are dynamic systems that can be deliberately altered, expanded and optimized through specific, sustained effort. This principle directly refutes the historical notion of intelligence as a purely inherited, static trait IQ and replaces it with a growth-oriented, engineering mindset. The foundational truth, intelligence is a verb, not a noun. This first principle demands a complete philosophical shift from seeing smartness as a measure to seeing it as a process of systems management. This cognitive shift is the first principle's act of getting smarter. All books, from Tracy's focus on thinking patterns to the brain science texts like Smarter, confirm this malleability, often drawing from decades of research into neuroplasticity and the Flynn effect. The three pillars of the malleability axiom. 1. The brain is adaptive neuroplasticity, the physical architecture of the brain, the neurons, synapses, and white matter pathways literally changes in response to focused, demand and novel experience. This means that skills, which are merely neural pathways, can be built and strengthened like muscle fibers, because deliberate practice, novel learning creates the effect. New or strengthened neural connections, i.e. intelligence. The get smart directive is therefore a mandate to continuously bombard the brain with novelty and complexity to force adaptive growth. 2. Intelligence is multifaceted beyond IQ. The books collectively reject the notion of intelligence as a single, monolithic score IQ. Instead, they highlight its existence as multiple, distinct intelligences, e.g., emotional, strategic, creative, spatial, practical. This is a critical principle because it dictates the method of improvement. One must strategically identify and cultivate the specific subtype of intelligence most relevant to their goals. The smart person does not try to raise a general IQ score. They target a specific skill or cognitive weakness for localized, high-leverage improvement. 3. The law of accumulation, the compound effect of effort, drawing heavily from Brian Tracy's methodology. The malleability axiom is governed by the law of accumulation or incrementalism. Since growth is physical, it cannot occur in massive, single leaps. It is the cumulative effect of small, consistent, high-leverage actions that creates an exponential return over time. The getting smarter process is not about finding a magic bullet, as some instant wisdom texts may imply, but about patiently making 1% improvements in a critical cognitive area daily. The foundational truth, the vast gap between the highest paid and the average, is simply the compound interest earned on daily, dedicated mental effort. Practical manifestations of malleability. Practical application of this axiom involves deliberate practice aimed at identifying cognitive weaknesses. The books universally champion techniques that deliberately stress the brain out of its comfort zone, long-time perspective thinking. As seen in Tracy's work, this is a forced cognitive restructuring. It is not natural to delay gratification. The brain's default is fast, impulsive thinking. Consciously practicing back from the future goal setting and weighing long-term consequences over short-term gain forces the development of the prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, which is the very definition of being strategically smarter. Metacognition, thinking about thinking. The ultimate expression of malleability is the ability to analyze and regulate one's own thought processes. This is the distinction between passively using the mind and actively directing it. Techniques like thinking on paper to slow down and externalize the thought process, and regular review of past decisions to identify cognitive biases, are direct applications of metacognition. The smarter one gets, the less they focus on what they know, and the more they focus on how they think. In sum, the axiom of cognitive plasticity is the liberation philosophy of the entire collection. It provides the irrefutable scientific basis for the self-help advice, because the brain changes, effort matters, and therefore, Getting smarter is a choice and a disciplined process of engineering one's own neural hardware. 2. The irreducible principle of focus and control. Managing the internal system, the axiom of agency and constraint. The second foundational principle moves from the possibility of change, malleability, to the mechanism of execution, centering on the axiom of agency and constraint. This is the irreducible truth that maximizing intelligence and competence requires absolute internal control over to primary constraints, attention, focus, and emotional, mental state. This is the domain of self-efficacy, discipline, and the internal locus of control. The foundational truth, smartness, is the result of managed focus and managed self. In the modern information economy, success is not limited by a lack of information or potential, but by the ability to isolate, focus upon, and execute high-leverage actions while effectively managing the internal landscape, emotions, beliefs, and motivation. This principle asserts that a person is only as smart as their ability to maintain intentional focus on their highest value activities, HVA letters. The 3 pillars of the agency and constraint axiom. 1. The constraint of attention, the mastery of focus. The critical realization across all texts is that the quality of one's attention is the single most valuable and most constrained resource. High achievement is not a function of the hours worked, but the intensity and depth of focus applied during those hours. The smart person practices concentration mastery, eliminating distractions, be it physical, digital, or mental, to engage in deep work or slow thinking. This is the antithesis of the shallow, mechanical thinking that many books describe as the barrier to higher-level thought. The ability to concentrate is the first-order operational skill of intelligence. 2. The constraint of belief, the elimination of limiting self-talk. The texts universally recognize that self-limiting beliefs are the most potent internal constraint on intelligence. The law of expectation, a sub-law of causality, asserts that what you believe with feeling becomes your reality. Thus, a massive component of getting smarter is the active, disciplined dismantling of negative mental programming. This requires the individual to exercise agency over their inner dialogue, consciously replacing phrases like "I can't do this" or "I'm not smart enough" with positive, action-oriented self-talk. This is a crucial act of mental hygiene that frees up cognitive resources, otherwise wasted on self-doubt and justification. 3. The locus of control, total responsibility. This principle is the ethical and psychological core of achievement. It is the realization that 100% responsibility for outcomes, good or bad, is the only stance that allows for continuous improvement. The moment a person blames an external factor, luck, environment, or other people, they surrender their agency and, critically, their ability to apply a corrective cause. The smartest people view failures not as final verdicts, but as neutral data points, feedback loops that inform the next action. This allows them to maintain emotional control, resilience, persistence, and rapidly adapt, maximizing their learning from every experience. Practical manifestations of controlled application of this axiom is seen in methodologies that force accountability and focus. Goal precision clarity is control, the act of defining clear, written, measurable goals is the ultimate expression of control. It is an intentional act that directs attention, making it easier to filter out low-value distractions. Clarity itself is a high-leverage cause. A fuzzy target, low clarity, is a primary cause of wasted effort, low efficiency. Discipline is freedom. Discipline is refrained not as restriction, but as the conscious, deliberate control of immediate appetites for the sake of long-term strategic advantage. It is the freedom from being a slave to impulse. The successful person exerts the discipline to eat that frog, tackle the biggest task, because they recognize that this single act of control sets the positive, high-value cost for the rest of their day, freeing them from the cognitive burden of procrastination. The axiom of agency and constraint asserts that the high-achieving mind is not simply a powerful processor, it is a highly regulated processor. The path to being smarter is, first and foremost, the path to being more disciplined in thought and action. The irreducible principle of strategic application, the operational blueprint for accelerated value. The axiom of leverage, the third and final foundational principle, connects the potential for growth, malleability, and the discipline of execution, control into a framework for real-world achievement, the axiom of leverage. This is the irreducible truth that high-level intelligence is ultimately measured by its output and efficiency, meaning the ability to generate disproportionately large effects from optimally selected causes. The foundational truth, smartness, is optimized value creation. The collective wisdom of the books argues that a person is truly smarter when they can apply their accumulated knowledge and controlled focus to create value. At an accelerated, leveraged rate, this principle moves beyond mere learning and focuses on strategic output and market value. The highest paid people are not necessarily the smartest in a traditional sense, but the smartest in strategic application. They are the most effective at identifying and deploying the few high-impact levers in any system. The three pillars of the strategic application axiom. 1. Prioritization as the ultimate leverage. The ultimate act of strategic intelligence is the correct application of the Pareto principle, 80/20 rule to all activities. This is the first-order decision that creates massive leverage. The smartest person doesn't work harder on every task. They spend their time ensuring they are working only on the 20% of tasks that will yield 80% of the value or income. This requires critical thinking, the ability to rigorously evaluate and deconstruct a system, to isolate its few key result areas. The individual is smart because they are strategically lazy, refusing to waste effort on low-impact activities. 2. Accelerated knowledge acquisition as meat leverage. Since all value creation relies on current, relevant knowledge, malleability, the true strategic advantage lies in the speed and efficiency of learning. The highest achieving individuals treat learning not as a passive absorption of information, but as an active, problem-focused strategy. They seek out informed thinking, data, facts, and expert opinions as the primary cause that allow us for superior decision-making, the desired effect. Furthermore, they employ tools and techniques like speed reading, conceptual mapping, and deliberate daily study to make their learning process itself the highest leverage activity. Their ability to rapidly assimilate and synthesize new, relevant information becomes their single greatest competitive advantage. 3. Creative thinking and problem-solving leverage on constraints. The smartest people see problems not as barriers, but as signals for leveraged opportunity. Creative thinking, the ability to generate novel and effective solutions, is the ultimate test of applied intelligence. This principle encourages the development of entrepreneurial thinking, which sees constraints, e.g., market challenges, resource limitations, as the very parameters required to force a creative, high-leverage solution. The process involves mechanical thinking, analyzing and breaking down the problem, followed by a forced period of creative thinking, generating novel solutions, and finally, a return to critical thinking, evaluating and selecting the highest leverage solution. This cyclical application of diverse thinking styles ensures that the final action cause yields the greatest possible effect solution. Practical manifestations of leverage. The axiom of leverage underpins all methodologies for maximizing output. The master plan backward mapping, the long-time perspective control, provides the desired end state, the ultimate effect. Strategic application demands that this vision be backward mapped into a series of highly leveraged key result areas, KRA letters. Success is achieved by mastering the KRA letters that are most directly tied to the desired outcome, focusing one's limited time and effort where the leverage is highest. Systems over effort. The highest form of leverage is the creation of a system that produces results independent of the individual's time. The final step in the Get Smart process is to encode one's accumulated knowledge and discipline, malleability, and control into a repeatable process, automated system, or delegated team structure. This ensures that the small, daily improvements accumulation are scaled and multiplied, generating massive, sustained value without requiring constant, direct manual effort. The axiom of leverage concludes the narrative. Being smart is not just about knowing more, it's about doing the right thing with the right intensity, at the right time, to achieve maximum output from minimal input. The ultimate smartness is strategic efficiency in value creation. The unified narrative, synthesis of the axioms into the operating system of the smart individual. The axiom of engineered excellence, the final, cohesive narrative that binds the axiom of cognitive plasticity, malleability, the axiom of agency and constraint control, and the axiom of leverage application is the concept of engineered excellence. This is the irreducible synthesis that defines the operating system of the smart individual mind, and behavioral pattern that is purposefully designed for continuous, predictable, high-level achievement. The foundational truth, excellence, is a self-designed system's ultimate synthesis across all texts. Is that getting smarter is the process of building a self-optimizing human machine. The smart individual views their entire life, their mindset, their habits, their professional output, and their financial trajectory as a complex machine governed by fixed, knowable laws causality, which they have the ultimate power to control, program, and refine. They move from being a passenger in their own life to the chief engineer. The four-phase operational cycle of engineered excellence. The individual operating under engineered excellence follows a continuous, self-correcting cycle that perpetually drives improvement. Phase 1, philosophical acceptance and diagnosis, the malleability foundation. The cycle begins with the foundational belief in malleability. The smart individual accepts, as a first principle, that their current state of intelligence and competence is merely a temporary snapshot. This leads to a diagnosis of the constraint. Using informed thinking, they rigorously analyze their current reality, their income, their skill gaps, their weaknesses to precisely isolate the single constraint, the key result area, KRA, or skill deficiency that, if improved, would most drastically enhance their value. This is the act of precision that defines smartness, knowing exactly where to apply force. They ask, where am I currently the least efficient, and what single skill, if mastered, would generate the highest leverage? Philosophical cause, belief. In cognitive plasticity, action effect, diagnosis of the single most critical constraint, KRA. Phase 2, psychological commitment and reprogramming. The control engine. Once the constraint is diagnosed, the individual engages the axiom of agency and constraint. This is the internal battle, where the mind is brought into alignment with the goal. The reprogramming cause. They aggressively eliminate the internal constraint of limiting beliefs and negative self-talk, replacing them with a self-concept consistent with the goal. They write down a clear, measurable goal, the target effect, and commit to 100% responsibility, the internal cause. For achieving it, the focus effect. They enforce slow thinking and concentration mastery to protect the focus time dedicated to the KRA. By asserting total control over their time and attention, they ensure that the resources of their mind are dedicated only to the high leverage actions identified in Phase 1. This phase is about building the emotional resilience, courage, and persistence required to sustain effort against setbacks, treating all negative feedback as neutral, actionable data. Psychological cause, absolute internal control and 100% responsibility. Action effect, creation of a disciplined, positive, and focused mental state aligned with the goal. Phase 3, incremental. Execution and feedback, the accumulation engine. This is the phase of sustained, leveraged action, driven by the axiom of leverage. The strategy now focuses entirely on applying the law of accumulation incrementalism to the diagnosed KRA. The execution cause. The individual engages in daily, deliberate practice and time-blocked effort on the HVA, KRA, committing to small, manageable, but consistently executed tasks. They view this discipline not as a burden, but as the systematic accumulation of compound interest on their human capital. The leverage effect. They continuously seek leverage points, systems, delegation, automation, or optimized processes to multiply the impact of their effort. They use the Pareto principle on their daily to-do list. ensuring that every hour of effort is applied to the most strategically beneficial cause. Creative thinking is employed here to constantly refine how the KRA is being addressed, finding more efficient, novel solutions. Operational cause, daily, focused, incremental effort on the KRA. Action effect, creation of exponential, cumulative progress and maximized strategic output. Phase 4, systemic review and recalibration, the continuous improvement loop. The cycle is completed not with achievement, but with a disciplined review. The smart individual recognizes that sustained success is not static, it requires perpetual adjustment. The review cause, they step back and employ the long-time perspective again. They rigorously review the effects of their actions against the causes they applied. If the desired effect goal was not reached, the fault lies not in external circumstances, but in the applied cause, a poor strategy, a flawed belief, or a lapse in discipline. The recalibration effect, this data is fed back into phase 1 diagnosis, and the system is instantly recalibrated. A new KRA is identified, a negative belief is challenged, or a process is optimized. The ultimate outcome of this continuous cycle is the minimization of wasted effort and the acceleration of personal evolution. Conclusion, the definition of engineered excellence, it gets smart conglomerate of ideas ultimately defines the truly intelligent person as one who has mastered this self-designed, self-correcting operating system. They are not merely people who possess a high IQ. They are people who possess an optimized Q quotient of deliberate action. Engineered excellence is the deliberate, disciplined, and perpetual application of the law of cause and effect to one's own cognitive processes. It is the choice to live as a cost-creator agency, using the foundational truth of malleability, neuroplasticity to strategically apply leverage. 80/20ths rule through incrementalism, thereby making high achievement a predictable, non-optional effect of a consciously designed life. This is the unified, irreducible first principle of getting smarter.